Okay.
Welcome back to another episode of the IFC's Individuation podcast. I'm Dr. Lahab Al-Samarrai, and with me today, our usual crew, Dr. Lisa Hong is with us, Dr. Eric Tomlinson is with us. Dr. Hong, you want to say hello, Lisa?
Hello, everyone.
Eric, you want to say hello?
Greetings, my friends.
Okay, now that you have gotten the greetings from the stars, we shall proceed. Today we're back with the archetypal symbols and fairy tales, the hero's journey. This is von Franz's second volume, and today we are going to go into another German fairy tale. It's called The Iron Boot. So without further ado, Dr. Eric, you want to start off?
Absolutely. This is one of the German fairy tales since Grimm, and it's called The Iron Boot. Once there was a king who had a fine castle and a wonderful queen. But they were not happy because although they had no want of riches, servants, mansions, and horses, they lacked the best and fairest of all. They had no children. This made their lives bitter, and quite often their hearts were so heavy that they had to cry. And to make matters worse, one day a great fire broke out and engulfed the whole palace. The king and queen escaped with their lives, but they lost all of their treasures. The only thing they could save was an iron box full of gold. With this gold, they constructed a new and even more beautiful castle, but again, their joy was short-lived. A second fire devoured the new castle, and nothing was saved, just the iron box. Now completely empty. They were suddenly as poor as the poorest man in their own country. No, even poorer, because a poor man can at least work and earn his bread, but he was not the king. With this king, however, all his servants, courtiers, and friends left. The king took his wife's hand, and they both went into the forest, deeply saddened. There they found an abandoned shepherd's hut and made do as poor people do. The king himself went into the forest, cut and brought the firewood home, and the queen made a fire, stirred the soup, and cooked potatoes. That was very unusual work for them, so it was quite bitter at first, but little by little all went better. It actually became even better when they were still sitting on their thrones and had all that they wanted. One day, the king went into the forest to cut wood as usual. A strange man appeared and asked the king why he, a king, was cutting wood. The king explained all that had happened, and the strange man promised to fill the king's empty iron box with gold if he would sign a contract stating that he would give the strange man everything he did not know. The king thought this to be trivial, and so he right away signed the contract. This turned out to be a careless act. The strange man laughed in an odd way and said, "Now stop your wood cutting and go home." When the king went back to his hut, his wife sprang out to greet him. "My lucky king, our iron box is full of gold, and our greatest happiness we shall soon have. I am with child." The king was very glad. He began at once to assemble all possible craftsmen, masons, and carpenters, and it was long before they stood in the midst of a most beautiful castle in place of their hut in the woods. And not 3 weeks more had passed, and his greatest wish was fulfilled. The queen gave birth to a beautiful young son. Now there was nothing left to be desired. The king and the queen gave the boy the name Ferdinand, and he grew up in happiness with his parents. When it came time to see his education, they sent the endangered child to a priest. There, Ferdinand learned not only piety, but all the arts and ways of the world. On the boy's 15th birthday, according to the contract with the strange man, the priest went with the young priest to the forest and gave him a the priest went with the young prince to the forest and gave him a magic staff and told him what he should do and how he should act. Then Ferdinand went to the place where his father had first met with the strange man. There he waited and listened and observed the forest. Suddenly a ship came sailing through the sky. It was full of singing devils that had come to take Ferdinand up into their vessel. But Ferdinand resisted with his staff and beat the demons so hard that they fled. Then a second ship came sailing through the clouds. This time, the crew of devils were even angrier and louder. But the prince again courageously beat them off with his staff, and they sailed away, howling in the wind. After a while, a golden chariot driven by fiery horses came at him, accompanied by a terrible din that confounded his mind. Inside was the evil one himself, furious and bent on taking what was his. Only with great difficulty did Ferdinand defend himself against the evil one. When the devil brought out the signed contract and pointed at the words in the king's signature, Ferdinand hit him so hard with his staff that the devil dropped the paper and drove off in a terrible mood. The prince returned to his teacher, but then soon left again. He explained that now the time had come for him to seek the kingdom of heaven.
Prince Ferdinand now set off and soon came to a gray-bearded hermit living on the shore of a large lake. When asked the way to the kingdom of heaven, the hermit responded that he himself did not know, but his brother did. He pointed and said his brother lived still farther on through an even larger forest, and there at the edge of an even bigger lake. The prince went on the further shore and met a white-bearded hermit. This one also said he did not know the way, but surely the third brother did. Ferdinand went on, deeper and deeper, and met the third hermit. This one also admitted that he did not know the way, but in his hut upstairs there lived birds that surely did. Ferdinand entered the hut and climbed to the upper floor. There he met screeching birds that told him to wait for a griffin, which would soon come back from heaven. When the griffin appeared, Ferdinand asked him if he could take him to the kingdom of heaven. The griffin agreed, took Ferdinand up in his claws, and flew him to the kingdom of heaven. There, the prince found a magnificent garden, a golden castle, a pond with a huge, terrifying snake. Ferdinand went directly to the pond, and the snake spoke to the fearless Ferdinand. "I have waited a long time for you to come and save me. No one else can redeem me but you alone." She told him that to save her, he had to endure 3 nights in the golden castle without reacting, no matter what happened. On the first night, a company of wild people appeared at midnight who tempted Ferdinand to dance with them, but he remained motionless. On the second night, the same company came again, and this time beat him because he did not join them. On the third night, they dismembered and ripped him apart because he again refused to join. They danced and trod upon the pieces of his body. When the clock struck 1, the ghost disappeared. The rescued princess entered and revived the prince. They embraced and rejoiced and celebrated the redemption of the princess. She showed him all around the palace and the gardens, but forbade him to look into a small shed that they passed, explaining that it would cause his misfortune. Then they were married and lived happily ever after. After some time, the prince was no longer able to resist and peeped into the shed. There, in the darkness, he made out down below his father's castle and was overcome with homesickness. He tried to keep it from the princess, but she forced him to tell her what was wrong. When she heard the reason for his depression, she agreed to let him make a visit to his old home. She added that if in distress, he should call her name, but only if he met with real hardship. He returned down to earth. There, many things had changed. His mother had died and his father had married a young and beautiful woman. The king was overjoyed to see his son after all these years and called for a great feast. At the table, the king boasted of the unsurpassed beauty of his wife. The prince could not resist and said that he knew of another woman even more beautiful. The king challenged Ferdinand to prove his claim, and the prince thereupon called the name of his wife. She appeared in all her beauty, truly beyond compare, but she wore a pale complexion and carried a sad face. She spoke not, but wrote some golden letters on the table with her fine white fingers. It is impossible for you to rip apart a pair of iron boots, and equally impossible to travel back into the heavenly paradise. Ferdinand only too late realized his grave mistake. He ordered a pair of iron boots to be forged and restlessly tramped around the world for years through ice and heat, mountain and vale. When the boot soles were very thin, he again journeyed to the 3 hermits and waited for the Griffin. He implored the bird once again to take him to the kingdom of heaven. This the Griffin did, and underway told the prince that the princess had found a second husband, and they were just then getting married. Upon arriving, the prince crept into the castle and placed his shredded iron boots just outside the princess's bedroom door and hid himself nearby. When the princess came to her room, she recognized the boots and told the groom to wait in the main hall. She did not see Ferdinand, but rejoiced that he must be alive and somewhere near. She returned to the wedding guests and asked them for advice. She explained that she had an iron box where she kept her pearls and precious stones. One day, she had lost the key. Having searched all over to no avail, she had ordered a new key to be made. But just before she was about to use the new key, she found her old lost key. She asked the gathered guests, "Which key should I take now, the old one or the new one?" All the guests voted unanimously that she should take the old key. When he heard this, the new bridegroom crept away, and the princess was again happily united with Ferdinand.
Okay. So, Ferdinand. So our story is an alchemical story. It's a story of transformation. Our hero is born of a king and queen. The king and queen whose consciousness is always based on ego consciousness. Unknown to them is the unconscious. So the first confrontation comes, which is the fire. The first fire burns down the castle. They have a magic box that keeps their treasure intact. The treasure is gold. Gold is a symbol of the sun. Gold is a symbol of light. Gold is the source of the divine. Gold is the source of power. Gold is a source, it's an archetypal element, gold. We all recognize its value before we even knew what it was. The first time that humanity laid eyes on gold, they started mining it, hoarding it, put it in making jewelry out of it, till this day, the price of gold is what we use to measure value. Even though we have other forms of currency, gold is still, in today, hold, and actually its value keeps going up. Its value has never gone down. An ounce of gold is over, what is an ounce of gold? I think it's over 1,000 or something right now. It's very, very expensive at this point in time. So gold has always carried the divine. It's always carried that aspect of the divine. So they have it hidden away in a magic box. So they have this confrontation, this fire that burns everything. And fire is a cleansing, right? So fire cleanses everything. It's the destruction of the fire helps us kind of rebuild. It clears the space. It opens the space up for something else to come when everything turns into ash. This is a transformational process. The alchemists, to transform from one thing to the other. So there were elements in the old days that were key. Fire was one of them, sulfur was another, and mercury was another one. These were the elements that the alchemists used. These were primary elements in transformation. So the first fire burns the castle down. They take the gold from the iron box and sell it without even trying to figure out why the fire burned everything down. They sell it and then they build a second castle. The fire comes again. The message comes again. The confrontation comes again. Hey, guess what? You didn't solve it the first time. Can you do it the second time? So the second time it burns down. They go to the box is empty. But hence, they keep the box. Remember that, I'll get back to that. So they go to the woods. They find a cheap cabin. They live like peasants. Remember, this is a king and queen. They live in a castle. They have servants, people who, from tailors to hand servants or handmaidens, to people who are carrying their stuff, people who are cooking for them. They have cooks. This is a castle. So they move into the woods, deep within the unconscious. They're finally close enough to the thing that they had lost, because consciousness in that kingdom was key, or ego consciousness. The unconscious was terrifying. It was a fire. So they go into the forest, and in the forest, in the hut, he has to do the work. The king goes out to get wood, and he meets a poor peasant. And then a conversation starts between him and the poor peasant. And the poor peasant asks him a specific question, tells him that he could help him, tells him that he can make his worries go away, but that he would have to give up everything that is not known to him. That means he would have to give up the unconscious again. And he willingly does that. With that comes the gift. The iron box again is full of gold. And now the queen is pregnant and has a son. So that's the first half of the story. With that, what are your thoughts about the first half of the story? Dr. Eric, Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things hit me. First of all, gold is almost $2,000
Okay,
instead of
that's
$1,000.
right. Yeah, it's
It's very expensive.
Yeah.
We don't realize how little. I once read where if all the gold in the world that's ever been mined was gathered together, it would fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool,
Ooh,
or the base of the New York, or the base of the Statue of Liberty. That's it.
ooh.
There's just not much of it. Unlike diamonds, which are everywhere. De Beers has vaults and vaults underground that are mined by armies, because diamonds are common. They're not rare at all. They just do what they do to make. Anyway, that's another subject. The thing that struck me the most, Lahab, in this story, Dr. Lahab and Dr. Lisa, is about females, is about women. I don't want to say women because some people don't like the term women anymore. I'll just say female. And it's just amazing that heroes, time and time and time and time again, are shown to be in fairy tales and stories and all kinds of reminiscences as to be male. And yet, here's a male who had been actually disassembled. and it took the female in his life to put him back together. The power of the female hero is missing in many ancient stories and fairy tales, and yet they're there everywhere. And because of historically inundated male bias, we don't really look at the female heroes and see how powerful, how important, how needed, how a part of the entire plan they were. That's I mean, that's not the whole story of this story, but it's an important one, and I just had to say something about it.
Okay. Lisa, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was, I want to go back to Eric said in a minute, but my thoughts were just in the, once again, in the ego-driven mode. There is lack of foresight and lack of value in what is actually a priority and what it is that they really truly value. It doesn't reflect what they truly value when decisions are made in an ego-driven impetus.
Yeah, I mean, destroying the hut in the middle of the forest and building another castle, you basically destroy the area, you destroy the forest, you destroy that part of the unconscious that you need to be in touch with.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the parts that we have an issue with. These are the parts that make us, help us to see what we can't see, help us to go where we can't go, help us to get out of whatever we're stuck in. Ego consciousness is very limited, right, Lisa? So ego consciousness is, this is my life and this is it. There's a finality about it. There's almost like a boundary that's constrained, like it's coming in. Ego consciousness is it gives you a perspective, but that's it. It gives you one perspective. Where the unconscious can give you hundreds of perspectives, thousands of perspectives, depending on what perspective. It could take a radical perspective. It could take a couple of radical perspectives. So the first thing that happens is the son is born, and the son has a different perspective, right? So the son is a completely different perspective. So that's when we get to the second part of the story, which is how Ferdinand, so the consciousness is evolving from parent to child. Parents not very good with consciousness. Child is a lot more conscious. Child goes into the woods. Ferdinand goes into the woods. He faces these mythical events, and they come to him, and he is able to resist, and therefore he is able to see the treasure in the unconscious, which we've gone over in all of the stories that we've read. The treasure lays deep within the unconscious, and you cannot bring back the treasure into consciousness. You lose it. That's been an overriding theme that we've seen over and over again. You cannot physically bring it back. This is a treasure, but it's not something that you can
Possess.
bring back physically. Yeah, Lisa?
You cannot possess it. You cannot demand. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
It doesn't exist in the conscious realm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it can't exist in the conscious realm. So you can't bring it into the conscious realm because it's not part of the conscious realm, right? So he goes to heaven, where there's these two mythical there's a mythical creature called the Griffin. Dr. Eric, you want to tell us about the Griffin?
Well, the Griffin was a combination of a couple of different animals, and it's
a mythical beast.
Yes, it was.
It has wings.
It is a mythical beast comprised of a couple of different animals that had a variety of powers. It was able to fly. It was viewed as something extraordinary. It was viewed as something cosmic. It had archetypal power to all the people who thought about what a griffin was and what it could do. It was magical in many ways.
Yes. So there's this griffin, and then you have the snake. The snake is also archetypal. The snake throughout time has been seen in many different perspectives. First, the snake is what the Jungians call the animo mundi. Right? So it is the symbol of the world. It's the symbol of the world. That's what exists within the snake. It has been seen as the feminine. It has been seen as betrayal. It has been seen as evil. It has been seen as the devil. It has been seen as a temptress. But those came after monotheistic religions, those stories. Before monotheism, the snake was not looked at as an evil deity.
Good point, Dr. Lahab.
When monotheism came about, then there was only one God, and the God was male. And he was in charge of creation. And therefore, the snake became evil, became part of the devil's lair, because it symbolized that power that God has, which is creation. Because what does the snake do? The snake is both. And we talked about this. The snake is both the poison and the medicine. It contains both the wisdom and the danger. It is the duality of the snake that holds its prominence. The duality of what it gives into the world. Many goddesses, the goddess of magic, Hecate, in one of her hands, she holds a snake. And the snake represents the healing and the unknown. That which cannot be defined, something mystical, something magical. Because we have instinctually, we react to snakes because snakes were dangerous. But snakes do not attack you. You would have to mess with them for them to attack you. They don't go out of their way. They don't seek you out. So that is a part of a snake. Snakes do not seek you out. They will seek out little mice, but they will not seek you out. They will not seek out people to attack or animals to attack. It does not do that. That's not its purpose. It's not the way it behaves in nature. We always have to remember that the way the animal behaves in nature is part of the essence of the mythology of that animal. So that's why we have the Monkey King, because it's the way the animal behaves in nature. Or the Lion King. You know, in this case, we have a griffin and a snake. The snake turns into a beautiful princess. And this beautiful princess decides that she will take Ferdinand if he passes her test. There are 3 tests. And this story, there are pieces of this story in other stories. So if you hear like similarities, that's what you're hearing. So this story is a German fairy tale, but also in Chinese mythology, they have a story similar to this. This is how we know it's archetypal. Right? Very, very similar. There's also a griffin. There's also, I think it was, what was it? The Lady of the Lake. And she came from heaven with an army. And the Chinese myth we read in the first volume. So she, the goddess of the lake, I think. The jade goddess of the lake, or I think so, something like that. Yeah, so next week I'll look that up. But that symbol of the goddess is what he meets deep in the realm of the unconscious. So heaven and earth, what is below is above, and what is above is below. Heaven and earth basically reflect each other. So you're thinking, well, how does that work? How does it work that they reflect each other? Well, so if you have 2 opposite sides, they cannot see themselves without seeing the other. It's like when you're staring at Zoom. You're staring at other people, but they're staring back at you. So you're staring at yourself. So to see yourself, you have to look at that which is not you. So you look in the mirror, you look in the camera, you look at video, but that is not you. That's the reflection you think you see. That you think is you. And that's how the reflection works. So our mystical princess gives him 3 tasks. Right? So he has to face a band of people who want to make him dance. People who are trying to frighten him. And then people who are trying to get him to speak. So the task is not to speak, to hold one's own, to basically not speaking is differentiation. I am different from you. I am not you. My spirit is not your spirit. I'm differentiated. No, go ahead. Tell me your opinion. No. My opinion is not to be shared. I'm differentiated. That's what she asked him to do, to show that he was differentiated, to show that he was conscious enough to be in a relationship with her. I think what Dr. Eric was trying to say, of our princess hero. So that she is holding him to a standard.
Yes.
So anything that we initiate ourselves into, anything that we take a task. So, for example, we say, I am going to go and finish this degree. And you go and you finish the degree. Now, to set off on a task, you have to be able to be committed to finishing the task. Otherwise, the task never gets done. The degree never gets delivered. You basically don't differentiate. The more you differentiate, the more you become whole, the more you individuate. That's what differentiation is about. It's individuation. It's about becoming whole.
Can I expand on that? And
Yes.
Story. Yeah, and to go back to Dr. Eric's point about, I see what you mean by a woman being the hero, or creating a hero, giving a transformation, or laying out the opportunity, and for one to elevate themselves in their consciousness. So I see what you are meaning in that, in the role of the female here.
Thank you.
And then in regards to the task that she bestows upon Ferdinand, for example, going along with your PhD program or graduate degree program, the naysayers that may say, you're female, you shouldn't be here. Not reacting to that, holding your space, knowing where you are, and holding and knowing what it is, what your intention is. Getting a terrible, flunking a test, not understanding a concept, being beaten down and ripped apart in several different ways, but holding your ground, not reacting, and focusing on your task at hand, of knowing what the ultimate goal is, and believing in yourself, trusting in yourself that you will follow through.
Yeah. So then the goddess of creation, because that's what she is, she's transformed. She's the queen. She's the queen in heaven. Queen of heaven means she's a goddess. So she marries the prince, Ferdinand. And then the third part of the story starts. The third part of the story is that Ferdinand feels lonely and sees what used to be the cabin, now a castle in the middle of the forest from the sky. Because somebody has built a monstrosity. We know about those monstrosities. We have them all over the place. They're eyesores. They're built to reflect egos. So they're called towers now. They're not called castles anymore. They're called the John Hancock, the Sears Tower. No, it's not called the Sears Tower anymore. That's also been taken by somebody else's name. But all these things, all these buildings, all these towers are basically what we used to talk about as castles in mythology. And the castle is a symbol of the ego. The more inflated the ego is, the bigger the castle. You know, they make jokes about, you know, the bigger your gun, the bigger your car. But it's the same thing. It's about ego. It's about the consciousness. The problem is when your ego is too large, you exist in a conscious plane. You don't know what the unconscious plane looks like. It looks terrifying. It looks confrontational. It looks like it's going to completely overwhelm you. Because your energy, so you have a finite amount of energy. So your energy, if invested all in your conscious life, then your energy can't dip into the pool to be revitalized. Can't find the goddess. Can't find the mythical creature. Can't solve the puzzle. Can't hold their tongue. Can't hold their space, as Lisa put it very well. It's about holding space, but it's not about taking space. There's a difference between holding space and taking space. When the ego is too big, it's taking space. Oh, yeah, this is about me. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I went through it. Yeah, I've done this. Yeah. Space. It takes up more and more space. You know, the blowhards from the Republican Party take up more and more space. Yeah. All the fascists that support them take up more and more space. And their voices become louder. Their arguments become delusional because they live in only one space. They're stuck in the consciousness of the ego and can't see beyond. That doesn't mean the unconscious doesn't have forces that it doesn't unleash. As you see in the story, what does it do? It burns everything down. So, for example, now what we have is global warming. It's not global warming. The globe is not warming. We have turned the globe into an oven. And we keep turning up the temperature because we cut down the trees, because we're mining the ocean, because we're polluting the ocean. So recent United Nations report is that by 2040, if we have not cut 30% of our fossil fuel use, it will be too late to turn the clock around. I think maybe I need to say it again. It's too late to turn the clock back. Because what's going to happen is the coral reefs are all going to die. There'll be more flooding. There'll be less fresh water. There'll be more fires. You're basically turning the planet because my ego needs bigger cars. My ego needs to burn more coal. I think Trump's swan song was "Dig, baby, dig." Yeah, destruction when our ego is placed on this planet and all we could see is the edges of our ego. We don't know how to be empathic. We don't know how to connect to the other. We don't know how to share. We don't know how to see the planet for what it is. So what do these people do? They go into the forest, they take a hut, and they turn it into a castle. They must have decimated a corner of the forest, right? But at that time, the earth was covered by forest. But still, that's how you start to destroy. That's how your ego starts to take space. You're living in a house with 15 rooms, there's only 2 of you. That's how your ego expands. And your life, that rich life that comes from the unconscious, the treasure that comes from the unconscious, is not there anymore.
Dr. Lahab,
Yeah.
if I may, personal story here, if I may.
Sure.
That's why we all need people in our lives. When I reconnected with you, you became a hero. You helped me to realize that I don't have to die in the misery that I was feeling, that I could move forward with the help of your counsel, with the treatment. I'll also remember after you had, being very personal here, I don't care. After you had put that iron boot to my butt for a couple of nights in a row, and I was dismembered by it, but rightfully so. We were then in Dr. Lisa's backyard barbecuing. And then I sat down and Dr. Lisa sat down right in front of me, face to face. And then she became another hero of mine because she got very close to me and exuded her energy into me and helped me to realize that I had more strength than I thought that I did. She gave me her strength, and it helped me to dig deep in and recover my own strength. The next morning, you and I were in the car, you were driving me to the airport, and you said, "You seem a little bit more normal today. You're better." And I go, I damn well am. And it was because of 2 heroes in 3 consecutive days helping me to receive what I needed to receive in order to break loose of the bonds that had been holding me for years in prison and in captivity, to be let loose and to see that I have a whole new life that I can explore.
That's
and
the fire.
I want all of our listeners to understand that every single one of you have that opportunity. Find your heroes and connect with them. And both of you are 2 of my damn heroes. And I'm sorry if I'm embarrassing you, but so what? That's the story.
I don't think you're embarrassing us. I think it's a great compliment. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I don't think of myself in that fashion. Maybe I think you're correct. Maybe we should think of ourselves as heroes. Maybe out there, all of
Yes.
you could start to think about how you can help save this planet, save everything that we can save. But turn the tide, turn the psychological tide, that actually the planet is worth saving and that humanity should live on a beautiful earth, an earth that breathes and lives and gives us its natural beauty and gives us its sources. It feeds us, it takes care of us. And we stop acting like parasites on this planet
Yes.
towards
And
each
we
other.
can't, and Dr. Lahab, we can't save the planet until we save ourselves.
And so we need to start that today,
Yes.
because time is not on humanity's side. The planet will live. The planet will evolve. The planet will change. The planet will grow. The oceans will change. We will disappear, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
So with that really happy note, with that optimistic look at the future,
And it only took
we
me
don't
a
want
month
to
of
leave you with
session.
that thought. We want to leave you with the thought that if you can create it, if you can imagine it, if you could create it, if you can imagine, if you were able to ever be conscious of yourself, that you thought of something and then you did it, then you could do anything you want. And if enough people said enough is enough, then enough is enough. It will stop. It has to. So there is hope.
Yes, there is. For you.
I'd like
Okay.
to add that I think it's a lot of kinship and genuine taking opportunities that connect yourself with other people and
Mhm.
witnessing where they are and saying, I am here with you and you can do this, and bestowing upon them that finding the strengths and bringing them out with being connected with people. And, this can be translated to how you treat the earth, being present, appreciative, and respectful of the space that you occupy. Slowly by slowly, you don't do all the changes at once.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
wise.
And it's the same thing to do with other people. The same words that you use to treat the planet, we have to treat other people in the same way.
Yes.
We have to be good to other people. We have to see their plight. We have to see that they struggle like we struggle. Like they have the same problems that we do on this planet, that we are all on this ship called Earth that's flying through the universe. We have to know that we all have these issues on the ship. We don't need a sci-fi movie with a ship to see a bunch of people interact. We do that every single day. Okay, I want us until our next episode, I would like us to think positive, to think creation, to think with wonder and awe, to love, to connect, to be happy, to run outside, to play in the water, to play in the grass, to run around, to take our shoes off. I'd like us to get in touch with our iron boots. Because if we don't get in touch with our iron boots, we're not going to be able to touch heaven. With that, I am Dr. Lahab Al-Samarrai. This is the IFC's Individuation podcast, and I am not afraid.
And I am not afraid.
And I am not afraid.
And we are the IFC Institute. The Institute for Conflict, and we are not afraid. We'll see you next week. Thanks for staying with us.